You are now tuned in to the Project 365 experience.
All right, so for this week's basketball coaching section, I thought it might be cool to highlight a couple of things that I've been noticing in the FIBA World Cup. And as you guys know, we're a couple of days in. Great basketball. It's very high level. I encourage you guys to go watch it. So I thought it might be cool for us to look at a couple of things that we may be able to notice between the difference. And I want to use the NBA as a comparison, because I know the NBA is very prominent, is very mainstream. So if we are able to maybe see certain differences and understand the gameplay a little bit better, I thought that it might be able to bring you guys a lot of value. So breaking down the differences, and maybe we might be able to see some similarities between the FIBA World Cup and the NBA. So as you guys know now, from now on, the FIBA World Cup is going to be kind of like held in the same format as the FIFA World Cup for soccer, proper football, if you will. And it's going to be every 4 years. And as you guys could see, this year we have 32 teams, right? 8 groups, 4 per group, that are going to be competing to try to win the ultimate prize. So if you're just looking at the basic regulation, I'm just talking about rules of gameplay, right? Basic regulations. We're looking at, in the FIBA setting, you're looking at 4 quarters of 10 minutes. Whereas in the NBA, you're looking at 4 quarters of 12. So just out of that, you're able to see that right off the bat, you could see that in the FIBA game, you have 40 minutes. In the NBA game, you have 48. So just naturally, scores are going to be a bit lower in the FIBA game. You got 5 fouls to foul out in the FIBA game, whereas in the NBA, you got 6, right? So fouling out means that when a player has a certain number of personal fouls, right? Any infraction that you make on an opposing player, with a 5 fouls, you're out in the FIBA game, whereas in the NBA you have 6, right? So in the NBA you have 6. You could protect your star players a little bit better. You can have a star player. The gameplay becomes a little bit different because now maybe a player comes back into the game after picking up their 3rd in the first half. Whereas in the FIBA, a lot of times, a lot of coaches opt to not allow those players to pick up those 3rd fouls in the half, which means that they sit them and don't allow them to go back into the game. And yeah, the bonus rule, 5 to shoot for bonus. So bonus is when you're over the penalty. So you have a certain number of fouls that you are allowed to do without your opponents shooting the ball. You'll notice that the rules are a bit similar, but the biggest difference that you'll see is that in the FIBA game, if you haven't fouled, if you need the other team to shoot free throws, and you haven't fouled enough times in a quarter, and by the time you're at the 4th quarter, that's what you end up seeing. You have to foul 3, 4, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas in the NBA, they try to speed it up, where as soon as you make 2 fouls in the last 2 minutes of a quarter, you automatically go to the line for the next one. So now we are going to look at just gameplay and just, again, the rules, and just for us to be able to understand different things. So if you have somebody that is new to the FIBA game, what you'll notice is that the game is like so fast. The ball's moving, it's popping, it's everywhere, right? So what you'll notice is the rules are a bit different, but we're gonna dive into every single one of these different changes that we might be able to see. So in the FIBA, what you'll notice is that there's no defensive 3 seconds, right? Which means that players don't have if you look at the NBA, you can't, when you're playing defense, you can't stay in the key on defense for longer than 3 seconds. In FIBA, you are allowed, which means that now players are already helping. They're already loading up to the ball. And what that does is that gives less space to the somebody who's really good offensive player, because we know that space is, the more space you have, the more real estate you have in basketball. So we know that the more space ultimate creator, ultimate finisher has, the more they could put damage on you. You'll notice that in the NBA, with players not being able to sit in the lane, right? There is a defensive 3 seconds in the key. So a defensive player can't stay in the key in the NBA. So what you'll notice is it's easier for players, in my opinion, it's easier for players to make their reads, because the defense now always has to shift to the ball, and then you just got to make a reaction out of it, right? So by you kind of not being able to kind of stay in position, let the offensive player react to you, you're moving into the space, which is automatically triggering that reaction from the offensive player. And these NBA players are so good that they just make the reads like it's second nature. So, and you'll hear a lot of players that'll talk about the differences between overseas and NBA and all that kind of stuff. And what a lot of players will say is that it's a lot of NBA players would struggle in overseas, is what they're saying. And when they're saying struggle, it's not struggling in perpetuity. We're talking about just being able to struggle to adjust, because you'll go from having so much space where you could get your reads and dribble down and into the paint and kick out and all that kind of stuff, to now a little bit less space, where now it's a little bit harder for you to just act freely. And FIBA, what you'll see is that it's very physical. So you'll notice that NBA players will go into, so if you look at in an NBA game, you'll notice that a superstar on the team will sometimes get to the free throw line 8 to 12 times. Well, at the FIBA level, if you start looking at it, you'll notice that NBA players that are playing in the FIBA level during this World Cup, they'll draw fouls in the same contact that they would normally get in the NBA. They're not going to get it at the FIBA level, because the referees officiated differently. There is, and I invite you guys to go look at our episode that we had with Corey, who was talking about the different rules of how it is officiating. What you'll notice is the officials would look at the game from a cylinder standpoint, right? So a player that gets the positioning and is able to just go straight up, what you'll notice is the referees are less likely to call those fouls, because what the referees are looking at, they're not looking at the contact, they're looking at, in terms of positioning, who established positions first. And in episode 10 of our podcast with Corey Connors, who is on his way to becoming an NBA referee, you guys will see that we talk about some of those things where the officials are taught and they study the game in a way that is really proportionate to positioning. And it's just about, there's that cylinder that they are taught that they have to look for. So also something else that you guys will notice is that in the FIBA game, when people are setting screens, you could be a bit more physical on the screens. So you'll notice that players like Lou Dort, that is playing for Canada, players like Dylan Brooks, and other defenders that are in this FIBA World Cup, a lot of times what they'll do is that you'll see they'll be using a lot more hands. Whereas in the NBA, there's more emphasis on freedom of movement, so you can't have hands as much. Whereas in the FIBA game, you can kind of jam offensive players a little bit more, and now what that does is it gives them less space. So now the comfort that you have of not being touched, now you're being kind of like jammed and bullied in a way that is less favorable if you're trying to make decisions. Let's looking at the athletes and the teams. Well, you'll notice that in the FIBA game, the decisions are faster. The ball doesn't stick as much. They're moving, it's rotating, it's moving, boom, 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 it's passing. And whereas in the NBA, what you'll notice that playing style, you'll notice that we have more isolations and we're attacking more mismatches. In terms of superstars, Our FIBA superstars are still superstars, but what you'll notice is that it's harder for a player to score a lot. And if you score a lot, you're really elite. Whereas in the NBA, because as soon as somebody touches you, you can go to the free throw line. There's less space. There's nobody sitting in the key. You're able to get all the way to the rim. You're able to get to the rim, draw the next defender, kick out, make those reactions. What you'll notice is that the superstars' numbers are going to be inflated in a way, and that's something that I think I would have not really paid attention to if I was still younger and looking at this FIBA game. But what you'll notice is that not a lot of players will score 30s. Like a really good game at the FIBA level is anywhere between 15 to like 22 points. You played an excellent game. But in the NBA, you'll notice that a lot of times, sometimes like the third options and like some role players, they could get to 20 easily because there's more possessions, and like I said, the reads are a little bit better and the rules favor offensive scoring. And in the FIBA level, you'll notice that slower athletes can play. And when I said slower athletes, I kind of think a little bit more as, people that come to mind is like the tall 7-footers, like Rudy Gobert, Taco Fall, guys like that. Well, in the FIBA level, you could sit those guys in the lane. You could sit them and just have their hands up and protect the rim if you want. They don't ever have to leave the paint. Whereas in the NBA, playing defense, you'll notice that what they really favor is people that can guard multiple positions. So an athlete that is more favorable to switching on guards, keeping guards in front of them, multiple position, you're here, switchability and all that kind of stuff, right? So these are all some things that we can look at. And I will say key statistics that if you want to really lock in and really start understanding this game. The reason why I chose these 4 statistics, which are rebounding, turnovers, the stats for free throws, and the 3-point field goal percentage, is because there are less possessions in the FIBA game. Okay? So just by doing pure math, off the top math, if a game has 48 minutes and another game has 40, naturally there's going to be less free throws. There's going to be less possessions, in the game that has 40 minutes. So with that being said, I chose key statistics that we can focus on that are focused to be more impactful in a game that has less possessions. So if we're looking at rebounding, talked a little about rebounding in our podcast, and rebounding is every time you grab a rebound, you generate a possession for your team. Whether it's offensive rebound, whether it's defensive rebound, it's a possession for your team. The more of those that you can get, whether it's offensive rebound, whether it's just defensive rebound, securing, not giving another possession to the other team and kicking it out, that will play a favor into your team's advantage because you are getting more chances to score in a game that has less possessions. If we're looking at turnovers, why are turnovers very important? Well, because turnovers for 2 reasons. One, they allow us to get set, right? If we turn, especially live ball turnovers, if we turn the ball over, we don't allow our defense to get set. And in a game that favors defense in a lot of areas, right? Like defensive, sitting in the key, and being able to jam people on ball screens and be more physical with them. Well, why wouldn't we not want to make the other team play more 5-on-5 offense? When we turn the ball over, we don't really allow ourselves to get set. And that is where it can be a real disadvantage. So I chose turnovers because anytime we're able to keep our turnovers low, we allow ourselves to, 1, set up and play better defense, but 2, also we allow ourselves to take a shot at the basket, which is points in our favor. Free throw stats. We talked about how hard it is to be able to get to the free throw line, right? Initiating contact and when the referees call them, right? So when you're able to make free throws, get to the free throw line and all that kind of stuff, I think it definitely plays into your favor, right? So free throw stats, getting to the free throw line is 1, but we got to be able to make them. And lastly, I put 3-point field goal percentage, right? Because less possessions, if we can it's one of those where, like, if we can make some threes, those are an extra point, and that ultimately adds more value to our total number of points score. But with that being said, if a team takes a lot of contested threes, a lot of bad threes, a lot of shots, shoots a lot from the three, and doesn't balance it out with being able to get to the rim, what ends up happening is you kind of set yourself up in a way where you got to be willing to be efficient with it, right? You got to be willing to get to the paint and generate those threes, because I tend to find that from my past experience, there's been a lot of stories to the season where it's like a team didn't make a lot of threes, and that's because the team settled for them. And I think it's good to look for threes, but I think not falling in love with them is the key, where you take the threes that come naturally, and then you hope that, you know, you have the good mechanics, your footwork's right, it's not as contested, and you can make them. But ultimately, I think once you do make threes and you have a good ratio of make threes, quality threes, I think that is a great way for you to be able to set yourself up for success. So yeah, the FIBA game, I'm really loving it. Just a couple of things that we can start looking at, just comparing it to the NBA a little bit. And that's what we got for this week's basketball coaching section. I hope this brought you a lot of value.